Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let us read from the verse 7th verse. On the 7th page. Niyatasya tu sannyasah karmano papadyate mohatasya parityagah tamasah parikirtitah Dukkhamityeva yat karma kaya klesha bhayatyajed sakrutva rajasam tyagam naivatyaga phalam labhed karyamityeva yat karma niyatam kriyate arjuna sangam tyaktva phalam chaiva satyaga satviko matah karyam idyeva yat karma niyatam kriyate arjuna. Hey Arjuna, whatever action that has been enjoined, whatever is your duty, that means that whatever is the appropriate or becoming response on your part to a given situation, this is how we can understand the duty. So whenever I confront a situation, then a certain response is expected out of me, and thus responding to every situation in a becoming manner. This is what we will call our duty. Karyam. So whenever I confront a situation, then the response from my heart is, hey, I should do this, I should offer this. So when a response of doing something, offering myself, when that response occurs from me, sangam tyaktva phalam chaiva, and then also sangam tyaktva, giving up this attachment, meaning giving up this strong identification that is I who is doing, but doing it in a very humble way, doing it as a devotee, meaning performing an action as an offering to the Lord. So person who acts as a devotee. So there is a tamas ahankara, rajas ahankara, and sattvic ahankara. So this is sattvic ahankara. So ahankara is there, the individuality is there, sense of doership also is there, but sattvic. So as a devotee, I perform that action in the humble spirit of a devotee. Phalam chaiva, and further, with reference to the result, well, I seek no personal reward as a result of performing that action. If someone does this, satyagaha, sattviko mataha, this tyaga, this renunciation, Lord Krishna says, is sattvic, meaning born of sattva. That is, a person who has this frame of mind, which is what we call sattvic, he will make this kind of a sacrifice, or he would have this renunciation of not asking for any personal reward. And we said yesterday that we must distinguish between the result of an action and the reward coming from an action. So when an action is performed, an appropriate result or outcome will come. But we associate with that outcome, there is always a personal element in this, as much as not only am I seeking an outcome from a result, but I am also seeking some personal reward, some gratification of the ego. This is also what I am seeking. It is that part to which this person is indifferent. It doesn't matter whether my ego is gratified or not, whether I get a reward. In fact, doesn't ask for the reward. Satya, there is also humility. Why should I get the reward when Lord is doing everything? Who am I to ask for the reward? Even though I am supposedly doing, but then I am doing only because of grace of God. I am doing because of whatever abilities and knowledge He has given to me, whatever opportunities He has given to me, and therefore I am doing it as an instrument. And therefore if some reward has to come, it should go to Him. So this person does not brand himself either as successful or a failure. If success comes, that also is assigned to Lord. If failure comes, that also is assigned to Lord. So because he doesn't have that strong identification while performing the action, he doesn't have identification with the result also. And therefore his object with reference to action as well as object with reference to the result. This is how a sattvic person's relationship with karma, action, and the result is. Now if you want to become sattvic, then we fake it and make it. This is what we try to do. So while performing the action, I remind myself, as Lord Krishna has said in the Bhagavad Gītā in many places. It will be said in the 18th chapter also. Yat karoshi yadashnasi yat juhoshi tadasyat yat tapasyasi kaunteya tat kurushva madarpanam. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you do in form of performing a yaga, whatever charity you offer, whatever austerities you perform, whatever religious duties you perform, whatever else you do, tat kurushva madarpanam. Here Arjuna, perform those actions in a manner that they become an offering to me. This is the theme that Lord Krishna repeats again and again in the Gītā. So whatever you do, make it an offering to me. This is what we call the spirit of devotion. So devotee is the one. This is always what it is in love, in the relationship. When I love somebody, I always want to offer myself. This is what the love always does. It motivates me or just makes me do things for someone that is an object of love. And so also a devotee is the one who wants to do something for the Lord as an offering. And so, and as we said, as says Narada says in Narada Bhakti Sutra, that love is a reward in itself. It's not that as I did something, that again I ask for some reward. In doing itself is a reward when it is an action of love. However, as we said, if you want to cultivate that love within ourselves, if you want to cultivate that devotion within ourselves, then I act as though I am a devotee. So I fake as though I am a devotee, and in course of time, I make it. How would I do if I were a devotee? Well, if I were a devotee, offering itself is my pleasure. So, this, in order to develop that sattvic, or the sattva, the purity of the mind, Lord Krishna prescribes this attitude of a devotee. So, question is whether bhakti yoga is a separate yoga or not. It is not. Inasmuch as when action is performed in the spirit of devotion, then that becomes karma yoga, and therefore then bhakti yoga doesn't become a separate yoga. It gets woven, the bhakti of the devotion gets woven, because bhakti is the love of the spirit that there is, and the spirit always seeks an expression. And so performing my duty becomes an occasion to express my love that I have for the Lord. And if I want to cultivate that love, then I deliberately perform actions which are conducive to invoking that love from myself. That's the reason why parents bring their children, ask them to prostrate here, recite this, do things. They don't care to do sometimes, they just do it because the parents ask them to do. But it is hoped that by just doing that in course of time, the spirit that is involved in doing will arise. So there is form and there is spirit. Ideally, action is the form and the attitude is the spirit. And ideally, the action should follow the spirit. Many people insist that what's the point in doing these rituals unless there is devotion? What's the point in doing something unless the appropriate spirit is there? But that is not definitely right. Because the spirit is not there, I just adopt the form. And the form will bring about the spirit in course of time. So Swamiji says, physicalize the worship, or physicalize the attitude that you have. It is a value for worship, put it this way. Even though I may not have much of worship right now, but I have value that I want to become a devotee. If the value is there, then I act as though I am a devotee. What would I do if I were a devotee? And by doing that, that is giving expression to my value for devotion. In course of time then, I keep discovering the devotion. This is how the mind becomes sattvic. So as we said, when the mind is under the influence of rajas, then the person who has rajas always a demanding person. There is a keen sense of my inadequacy when the rajas is there. And keen sense of inadequacy and the insecurity. Therefore, I am a demanding person. And there is a bhoga buddhi always, the desire for enjoying the pleasures. This is what rajas brings about. If I want to transform it, then I must make a deliberate effort by not encouraging that attitude of seeking pleasure and seeking reward, but instead replacing the attitude of offering. So this is a constant work that we do, and this is what is important. Whenever my mind comes up with the demand for a reward, I replace it by a spirit of offering. So this is what happens inside. What happens outside is all action. That's all is visible. And as we said, it is not so much the action that does things, but action becomes an occasion to work with my mind. Because whenever I start to do something, my reward-seeking mind always comes forward and says, what is in it for me? This is the tendency of the mind, always seeking reward. And when the mind presents this desire of reward, I say, look, mind, look. It is the reward is the doing itself the reward. You are already rewarded. These actions will perform as a returning the favor, because reward you already have. And so every time the mind comes up with its natural attitude, I replace it by this sattvic attitude. This has to be, otherwise it won't become sattvic just like that. Even performing rituals, it doesn't become sattvic. It's not an action that makes the mind sattvic or anything. It is the spirit or the attitude that is there behind the action. And therefore, a karma yogi, that is why this is a path of knowledge, understand. Even though we call it yoga of karma, but then it becomes yoga provided every karma or every action also becomes an opportunity for me to learn something. Thus every action becomes an opportunity to learn about my own mind as to what kind of tendencies it has. And so, whenever I have to perform an action, that tendency is triggered and it comes to the surface. Like there is a pond of water or there is a puddle of water, I throw a pebble, then whatever dirt is at the bottom, it comes to the surface. And similarly also, because action means what? I have to do something. And then I'm not going to do something unless there is a reward usually. And therefore the reward-seeking tendencies will surface whenever an action is to be done. My mind will always ask, why should I do that? What am I going to get out of it? And thus then I get an opportunity to educate my mind. And so Karma Yoga, understand, is a process of constantly educating my mind. Constantly reminding my mind of the value. Look mind, what you are seeking is the attainment of what is already attained. Why this beggarly attitude? Why do you always seek rewards? Why do you are asking? Why do you are begging? And this I want to convert my mind from a beggarly mind to a giving mind. And that doesn't happen right away. It is like completely turning the flow of the river and taking it to its source, So naturally water has a tendency to flow from a higher to a lower level. And imagine somebody trying to change the course of water to its source, what an amount of effort would be required. And similarly also, to change the tendency of the mind requires a constant effort. Satyagaha. And this, what is the tyaga? Tyaga or the renunciation here is of these natural tendencies of seeking pleasure, seeking gratification, seeking reward. This is the natural tendency. And that is what is renounced. Nothing else is renounced. And only thing that I possess are those things. So ignorance is my private property. That's all I possess. And all these various notions born of ignorance also are mine. In fact, that is what we have to offer to the Lord. Satyagaha satviko mataha. Hey Arjuna, this tyaga, renunciation of this extrovert tendencies. What is meant by extrovert tendency? The tendency of demanding, tendency of begging, tendency of seeking gratification, and constant offering of that tendency. Replacing that tendency by a tendency to give. It may be difficult because mind doesn't want to give. It's like asking a boy, come on, here is a candy, give half of it to your sister, younger sister, doesn't want to give. But we make him give that. And instead of giving half candy to each of them, I give the whole candy to this fellow. Ask him to give half to his sister. And once I turn away, he may snatch it away also. I do not know. But anyway, I ask him to do. That's how the parents train their children. And then he gives half candy, and then sister is very happy, and then he sees the sister, little sister, enjoying that candy. And that hopefully, the joy which is there on the face of the sister will motivate this fellow to give her again, That's what we hope. And similarly, this act of giving, when we see the joy on the part of the recipient, or whatever little thing we do. As I said, Karma Yoga is not necessarily doing big things. It is doing little things. What makes any little thing yoga is the attitude of the spirit behind that thing. And therefore, even if all our actions right away are not in the spirit of giving, because we don't feel safe, I'm afraid that if I start giving away, if I show this tendency, I'll be exploited and people will take advantage of me. A lot of insecurity is there. It's not going to be right away I become just a very generous and charitable person, but then I can reach out little by little. Little by little I can reach out, and that's how I discover the joy of reaching out. And that's how, once I start enjoying that, then it will become slowly easier and easier for me to do. So this karma yoga, that is performing action in the spirit of offering and without seeking a reward, is satyagaha satviko mataha. This renunciation is considered renunciation born of sattva. And what happens as a result? Well, some result is always there, of course, otherwise Lord Krishna would not enjoin or recommend us to do that. The fact that Lord Krishna prescribed this to us means there must be a big reward involved in that. This attitude has to be for our well-being, otherwise it cannot be prescribed in the scripture. So what is the ultimate reward that comes when I deliberately entertain this attitude? That is being said in the 10th verse. Nadveshtya kushalang karma, nadveshtya kushalang karma, kushalena nushajjate, tyagi sattva samavishtaha, medhavi chinna samshayah. Let us take the second line first here. Lord Krishna here gives a sequence of happenings to this aspirant as to what happens. What are the stages that he goes through? Tyagi, sattva samavishtaha, medhavi, chinna samshayah. These 4 stages. First stage is tyagi. Tyagi means renunciate. Remember, the earlier verse said, satyagaha satviko mataha. So this kind of a tyaga, this renunciation of offering, of my tendencies of always seeking reward, offering up that tendency, is a tyagi. So when this person becomes sattva samavishtaha, so this kind of a tyaga, this constant work carried out upon my mind, upon my various tendencies, that whenever any tendency that is classified as tamas or rajas, whenever it arises in my mind, whenever in my mind arises tendency of dropping out, not doing something, doesn't matter, let it work, so tamas, inactivity. Then I replace it by activity. When there is selfish activity, I replace it by selfless activity or the tendency of offering or giving. This is the person who is constantly doing this work. So Vedantin is busy 24 hours a day, as long as the fellow is awake. Inwardly. This is the Vedantic work. This is the Vedantic way of what we call the spiritual work that is constantly going on. Sattva samavishtaha. When Sattva means purity. Samavishtaha. So when that purity enters his mind, pervades his mind, take hold of his mind, the purity enters his mind. Samavesha. Avesha means entrance. Sometimes this avesha, the spirit also takes hold of me, that is also called avesha. Here sattva samavishtaha. The sattva or the purity is what takes hold of him. So this tendency is nothing but constantly offering the impurities. As I said, tamas and rajas. Whenever those tendencies surface on the mind, I replace it by sattvic tendency. It is painful. And the reason why those tendencies occur in my mind, because there are, as we said, there is insecurity, there is lust, and there is anger, there is greed. All these what we call demoniac tendencies are there. And usually they always come up first. And I must replace it by a divine tendency. So, sattva samavishtaha. This slowly and slowly the impurity starts, exhausting away. And what happens? You see, whenever we perform an action as prompted by likes and dislikes, then usually as a result, the likes and dislikes also are increased. So an action that originates, so this person, when Lord Krishna says karyam karam, karyamiti, that I must do some action. That means that he does not respond to a situation based on his likes and dislikes, but he responds to a situation because of what is to be done. So first of all, his very response that this is my bounden duty. Then his likes and dislikes are kept under check, because generally speaking I have a tendency to perform that action which is going to benefit me and avoid that action which is not going to benefit me. And so my choice of what I do is generally calculated, whether it is beneficial to me or not. But here, whether it benefits me or not, it should be done, and therefore I do it. And therefore, here the attitude is, this should be done, and therefore I do it, whether it is something in it for me or not. And so, the raga and the dvesha, the likes and dislikes, they surface every time I am about to do something, those are kept under check. And that's how they're always kept under check. And you see there's a little demon there under the feet of Lord Dakshinamurti there, under the foot. Subdued. Thus this tendency, ego. And what we mean by ego is these likes and dislikes, all these anger, greed, etc. So that ego gets subdued and subdued and subdued. Doesn't have to die. The ego doesn't die, it remains. What we call sattvic ego remains. Functioning, even wise person also has a functioning ego. But it is sattvic ego. It's enlightened ego. First it is purified and then it is enlightened. So a karma yogi purifies his ego. And so we see that little demon crouched under the foot of Lord Dakshinamurti. That's the ego, but that is subdued. And thus these tendencies of rajas and tamas, raga and dvesha keep on getting subdued. In fact, this happens even when we just want to follow the basic values of life. As we said, that if you want to be honest, then we have to let go of whatever benefit that dishonesty gives us. The reason why people are dishonest or that a person becomes angry when a person compromises values is because the compromising value has some benefit in it. And therefore, to follow the value, the benefits must be dropped. I must let go of the benefit that comes, material benefit that comes. So constantly this person is required to let go of the material benefit for the sake of the spiritual benefit. This is a constant thing going on. Sattva samavishtaha, and as a result, these tendencies which we call rajas and tamas, and all those tendencies are then reduced to these two, raga and dvesha, attachment and aversion. As I said, both of these result into demands. The attachment also results into demand of what I want, and aversion also results in demand of avoiding what I do not want. These demanding tendencies get subdued. Sattva samavishtaha. And sattva, which is the purity of the mind, slowly that surfaces. As we said earlier, that mind by nature is pure. And this impurity of likes and dislikes, those impurities are only incidental. Inherently, the mind is pure. But then, as we said, on account of a lack of viveka or discrimination, and therefore having performed action all this time with selfish attitude, these likes and dislikes have found their way inside and they have accumulated and they now take hold of my mind. But they are incidental. And inherently, my mind is pure. And so, as these incidental tendencies or impurities, as they are subdued, and slowly, the mind gains its purity, which is the natural purity. Sattva samavishtaha, the sattva, the purity of the mind comes. And what is sattva? Shankaracharya explains here. What is sattva? Atmanatma viveka vijnana hetuna. It is that mind which is capable of doing the viveka, separation or discrimination between atma and anatma. So in order for me to be able to distinguish the self from the non-self, I require this kind of mind. What we call sattvic mind, a mind enjoying the purity, a mind enjoying what we call objectivity. And so being able to stand apart even from what I am considering as the Atma, stand apart from the body, stand apart from the mind. So this is a mind that is capable of giving up the identification with the body-mind complex. So that is sattva. In short, in order to be able to do the work of Vedanta, what is Vedanta is really Atma Anatma Viveka. to be able to separate the self from the non-self. And to be able to do that, this mind is required. Very often people say, Swamiji, I am not the body anyway, but I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am not this, I am not that. But merely declaring it doesn't work, For me to say that I am not the body also, it requires me to be able to stand apart, create a distance. And that is what requires a sattvic mind, a mind enjoying this purity. So thus Vedanta, all the texts of Vedanta and Bhagavad Gītā also brings up again and again that antahagana shuddhi or purification of mind is a necessary requirement. And thus in the text such as Viveka Chudamani, this is told by what we call the sadhana chatushta sampattihi. Viveka is there, discrimination, vairagya, dispassion. And that solely brings about shama, the tranquility of the mind, dhamma, the discipline of the level of sense organs, uparati, and the mind has an abidance, an abiding mind. Sattvic mind is an abiding mind, a mind that is happy with itself, a mind in which there is what we call a self-acceptance, a mind that has an objectivity, and therefore is able to appreciate things for what they are. Sattva samavishtaha. So, karma yoga brings about sattva shuddhi, antahakana shuddhi, or purification of mind. Medhavi. The next step is medhavi. Medha, asya sthiti medhavi, the one who possesses medha. What is medha? Medha means wisdom. What is wisdom? Aham brahmasmi. I am Brahma. So this knowledge arises in this mind, which enjoys the purity. We imagine steps in between sattva, that sattvic mind, and medha means a wise person. He gains a wisdom. What is the wisdom? Aham brahmasmi, I am Brahma. But we imagine that other steps have taken place. So he becomes a vividisha sannyasi, imagine, Depends on the structure of the society, but in the Vedic times, what would have happened is a person who gains that purity of the mind discovers also vairagya. Vairagya means dispassion, a freedom from the need for pleasures. He discovers that inner pleasure, inner cheerfulness and happiness itself, and therefore becomes free from the need of any pleasure or any security or support from the world. Thus, sattvic mind or pure mind also is discovering an inner self-sufficiency. So this is in fact a journey of discovering the self-sufficiency. And moksha is when the self-sufficiency, the culmination of self-sufficiency is moksha. So moksha, liberation, takes place in stages. We can say that the first stage of liberation is purification of mind, liberation from the hold of this tendency is called raga and dvesha, likes and dislikes. Secondly then, the liberation from the duties. Then it becomes the second stage of sannyasi, what we call the vividisha sannyasi. We said earlier, that as the mind gains that purity, desire for knowledge happens. When the mind is an influence of rajas, there is desire for enjoyment. As we said, if one object, any object itself will in fact bring about different kinds of response from different kinds of people. And so, a person, like an apple falling, so that event can bring about different kind of response from different people. From a Newton it brings about the response, sattvic person. How come it fell down? How come it did not go? So that event in fact created in the response for knowledge. So sattva means desire for knowledge. For somebody else the apple falls down, looks like a very ripe apple, it fell down itself, let us see how it tastes, and therefore bhoga, the enjoyment response. For third fellow apple fell and doesn't matter, to him. He doesn't even notice it. If he notices, at the most he may take the apple to hit somebody, So tamas. So sattvic, rajas and tamas. One same thing, invoking different kinds of response from the people. So when a person is sattvic, the response that is invoked in him is the knowledge. What is the nature of this world? So when he was in the influence of rajas, world was a place of seeking pleasure. Now that he has become a sattvic person, world is a place of seeking knowledge. The very same thing now invokes in him the desire to know. So, where does this all come from? Adhihi bhagavo brahmeti, or if we are, sir, please teach me about Brahman. That's how he goes to the teacher. So Guru Upasadanam goes to the teacher. And as I said, going to the teacher is generally accompanied with the Vividisha Sannyasa, renunciation of his duties. So no more duties, goes to the teacher. Perform what you call Shravanam. Shravanam means listening to the scriptures. But Shravanam should be understood as Vedanta Vicharaha, and inquire into the nature of reality. Inquire with the help of the Upanishad. So this is where the first sutra, Brahma Sutra comes. Athato Brahma Jignasa. Asa means this, Sattva Samavishtaha. Vedanta begins after that. This Tyagi and Sattva Samavishtaha, the person is Sattvic. When the desire for knowledge arises, that is when now he is ready for Vedanta. Goes to the teacher, lives at the feet of the teacher, serves the teacher, performs Shravanam, which is the listening to the scriptures, which is what we said is Vicharaha. So, inquiry into the nature of the self, inquiry into the nature of reality. That inquiry is conducted in the form of Shravanam, followed by Mananam, Nididhyasanam, reflection as well as the deep meditation. As a result of that. So, a lot of time is involved. Between Tyagi and Sattva Samavishta, there is time involved, Sattva Samavishta, Medhavi, time is involved. Although these words are written right away, but it involves time. As Swami used to give example of that Greek philosopher. And this person has moved to some other island and is waiting for his family to follow, and is waiting. His family, all his property, everything is coming in a big ship, and he is waiting for them. And it seems one afternoon somebody knocks at his door, and there is a messenger, and that fellow is very excited, and he comes up with this very unpleasant, very sad news. Sir, your ship has sunk. He says, what? Yes, sir, your ship has sunk. So what? Sir, all your wealth is gone. What? Yes, you lost all your wealth. So what? I don't know, this is very big thing, Sir, your wife and children, they're all drowned. What? They are drowned. So what? So, between the news that is given to him and so what, for this philosopher it took him a few seconds, to reconcile or resolve this reality, acceptance of reality. But it may be a long time. For somebody it may take a year, 2 years, 20 years, a lifetime, or number of lifetimes to be able to accept the reality of life. And similarly also, between Tyagi and Sattva Samavishtaha, that's a whole process of constantly working with our mind and subduing the Raga Dveshas. Sattva Samavishtaha, now that I have started pursuing the knowledge, listening to the scriptures at the feet of the teacher, Medhavi, Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam. Also a long process. Because Medhavi, their Medha is the wisdom. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahma. He becomes possessed of that wisdom. And then, so what happens? Chinna Samshaya, he becomes free from all the doubts. Samshaya stands for all products of ignorance. He becomes free from all the doubts, becomes free from all the identification with the body. So he becomes free from all what we call the habitual error also, and thus becomes Sthita Prajna, one of abiding wisdom, which is Muktaha, Jivan Muktaha, the one who is liberated even while he is alive. This is called Moksha. So we say that Moksha is the ultimate goal, and the very first step is Tyaga. What kind of Tyaga? The Tyaga which is characterized by this Karma Yoga, the offering of my Raga Dveshas, subduing of my Raga Dveshas, that Tyaga or that renunciation is the first step ultimately leading to moksha. And it will happen. It has to happen because one has to follow the other. But this much we have to do. We have to start with this Tyaga. Now, how do we know that he is a liberated person? What is the pattern of his behavior? That is said in the first line. Na dveshti akushalam karma kushale nanushajyate. He does not despise akushalam karma, inauspicious karma. Kushale na anushajyate, does not cling to what is called auspicious karma. The idea is that we meet with these two kinds of situations, favorable situation, unfavorable situation. Or the duties also are sometimes pleasant duties and unpleasant duties. Like when the cultural program takes place, there are a number of roles, a lot of drama is there, a number of casts are there, characters are there, and children, I want to become this, and so the children want to become the king, and they want to become this, and nobody wants to become this a doorkeeper, nobody wants to become a beggar. Similarly also, any time when it comes to doing a certain action, I would prefer, because I identify with the action, therefore I judge myself based on the dignity of the action itself. So therefore we choose when an action is to be performed, then also there is a choice. I like to do certain things, I want to avoid certain things. This is what we find in the wise person. He does not cling to anything, nor does he avoid anything, because he is totally free from attachment and aversion. So really speaking, the total freedom from attachment and aversion is there only in the wise person. In Karma Yoga it is there largely. And as we go along with the inquiries, the Vedanta Vichara, the Upanishad Shravanam, more than listening to the scriptures, then the subtle work keeps on going on, and fine-tuning takes place. Ultimately one becomes a Sthita Prajna when is totally tuned, when thus is totally free from any aversion or attachment. And not attachment, not... So, what is considered auspicious by other people, we find him not attached. What is considered inauspicious by other people, we find him having no aversion. Only because he does not look upon something as auspicious or inauspicious. See, if the wise person looked upon something as auspicious and something else inauspicious, then he is going to respond to auspicious with something favorable, and inauspicious he will look upon something unfavorable. But when we find that his attitude is the same toward auspicious and inauspicious, favorable and non-favorable, binding and freeing. Certain actions are supposed to be binding actions, like the desire-prompted actions and prohibited actions, and therefore we avoid them. Certain actions we want to perform, which we look upon as actions that will release us. This person has no such thing at all. Whatever he is required to do, or whatever the situation calls for, he does it without any kind of reaction. That means the person is totally free from reaction. This is called moksha, that's all. Total freedom. And this person is a bound person whose response is dictated by the situation. And here is a free person whose response is dictated not by the situation at all, he is dictated by himself. And that is equanimity under all conditions. Because to him everything is in order. That's the real discovery of the order. To him everything is nothing but Brahman. Because when he knows himself as Brahman, he knows everything else also as Brahman. And therefore, what is auspicious also is Brahman, inauspicious also is Brahman, only in a given costume. So he responds everything as Brahman, coming in pleasant costume or unpleasant costume. So Lord Shiva is otherwise very inauspicious, inauspicious. In the cremation ground, smearing this ashes on his body, all this is inauspicious. But then he doesn't mind. Lord Shiva doesn't mind any inauspicious also, because to him everything is fine. We are not saying that everything is fine or something, but the idea is, when one can see that Asti, Bhadi, Priyam in every name and form, then everything is fine. If I don't see it, then of course I should follow the code of conduct. When for him everything is manifestation of Brahman, then everything is fine. And therefore the person who is at home with everything, for the simple reason that he is at home with himself under any conditions. And that is called freedom, which is not subject to change under any conditions, favorable or unfavorable. So this is a big thing that you get. By giving up these insignificant things such as likes and dislikes, what you get is infinite. And that is the reason why, so Lord Krishna says this, so this is ultimate sannyasa. Thus both the kind of sannyasas are, so 9th verse talked about sannyasa as karma yoga, the first sannyasa that we said. The 10th verse describes sannyasa as the vidvat sannyasa or the sannyasa characterized by knowledge. In between, we imagine a step, 9.5 verse, so that is what we call vividisha sannyasa, a renunciation of the duties taken for the express purpose of pursuing knowledge. We imagine that must have happened. And Lord Krishna does not mention it, so we believe that it is possible that even if you are a householder and continue to remain a householder, but then have a tremendous value for knowledge, then all unnecessary activities will drop off, or unnecessary contacts will also drop off, and remain in the house also, the fellow will become a sannyasi. He must become sannyasi anyway, whether in form or not, but in spirit a person must become a renunciate. Because this question is asked in India very often. Swami, is it necessary that we must become a renunciate, then alone we can get moksha? Shankaracharya strongly believes that. Shankaracharya strongly seems to believe that only the renunciation in form also is required. Lord Krishna seems to say that renunciation in spirit is definitely required. But Shankaracharya even seems to believe that renunciation in form also is required. Because it is very difficult to remain in the house. It's nice to say, Swamiji, I can remain, I can do what I have to do and I can still be a renunciate. It is easier said than done. And therefore, if you can do it, that's most wonderful. Remaining in the midst of all the activities, because a lot of provocation happens, So when I am in the midst of people and doing things, always provocation is going to be there. People will provoke me. They will push buttons. So we require some relief from that being pushed. And so this sannyasa, renunciation gives you that kind of enables you to have the distance so that you are not pushed. You have the leisure to be able to pursue the knowledge. Thus, in short, we require leisure. If you can gain that leisure while performing your activities, fine. The sannyasa in form is not a necessary requirement, but definitely leisure in the mind is a requirement, and so that my mind is not distracted by other things, and I can focus my attention totally to this. And therefore, Lord Krishna does not explicitly talk about Vividisha sannyasa, talks about two sannyasa, a sannyasi, gauna sannyasi, in a secondary sense, that is karma yogi, and sannyasi in the primary sense, that is a wise person having an abiding in wisdom. And therefore, Lord Krishna says that the primary sannyasa is possible only for a wise person, not until then. And that is being said in the 11th verse. Nahi deha bhruta shakyam, nahi deha bhruta shakyam, त्यक्तुम कर्माण्य शेषतः, त्यक्तुम कर्माण्य शेषतः, यस्तु कर्म फलत्यागी, यस्तु कर्म फलत्यागी, सत्यागीत्यभिधीयते, सत्यागीत्यभिधीयते. देहभृता अशेषतः कर्माणि त्यक्तुम न शक्यम. Actions cannot be totally given up by the one who holds on to the body. Dehabhrut, deham bibharti, it is dehabhrut, one who sustains the body, one who holds on to the body, is called dehabhrut. As long as one sustains the body or one holds on to the body, it is not possible to give up all the actions totally. What do you mean, Lord, what does it mean, sir? We think that even a wise person also has a body. So, what do you mean by holding on to body? Is it not that a wise person also has a body? And therefore, having a body is a requirement or is a condition that you cannot give all the actions. How to give up all the actions? So Dehabhrut is not one who merely has a body, but who holds on to the body, one who has identification of the body. That means one who has the notion that I am the body. Manusyoham, Brahmanoham, Gruhastoham. I am a human being, I am a Brahmana, I am a householder. Ityadi abhimanena. This is abhimana. This is abhimana is identification. So one who has identification of the body, meaning one who equates himself or herself to the body. For that person, it is not possible to renounce actions totally. You see, because at one point I call myself a Brahmana, or I call myself a Grihastha, whatever, then definitely I have to respond to the situation. The situation will always invoke a certain response from me. And so, as long as identification of the body is there, so long likes and dislikes are going to be there, and so long, even if I want to renounce all the actions, I cannot renounce them. And that's what Lord Krishna is saying to Arjuna also. that as long as you look upon yourself as Arjuna, and therefore look upon yourself as a Kshatriya, and therefore you have that very identification and certain notion that I am a Kshatriya, so long the likes and dislikes associated with that notion are going to be there, and so long even if you want, you cannot give up all the actions. In short, you should not give up the actions. That means that one should not renounce the actions as long as there is a strong identification of the body. As long as there is this strong notion that I am so and so. That means a sense of individuality is strongly there, or the likes and dislikes or attachment aversions also are there, so long one should not give up the action because one cannot give them up. So in the third chapter, Lord Krishna said also that an ignorant person cannot remain inactive even for a moment. Karyate shavashah karma sarvah prakriti gunehi. His very nature will compel him to do something because there is restlessness inside. See, otherwise, when I take myself to the body, then naturally there is a sense of limitation and there is a discomfort with my own self. So as long as I am not comfortable with myself, the discomfort will always propel me to do something or the other. As a result, a person cannot and therefore should not give up the actions as long as one is dictated by the likes and dislikes. As we said, the scriptures do sanction the giving up the duties on the part of a person who has a sense of doership but is not dictated by likes and dislikes. That is when one gains that purity of the mind, when the likes and dislikes are no more a problem, then one can give up the actions in a secondary sense, become a renunciate to become really a renunciate. So Swami used to say that a sannyasi also has to become a sannyasi. Sannyasi means one who has become a sannyasi renunciate to pursue the knowledge must become a renunciate in the primary sense. Yastu karma phalatyagi. On the other hand, Lord Krishna says, Yastu karma phalatyagi. So one who has renounced his karma phala, attachment to the reward, satyagi iti abhidhiyate, that person is really called the tyagi or the renunciate. So that is, this is karma yogi. Yastu karma phalatyagi. One who has renounced the attachment to the reward result of action, satyagi iti abhidhiyate. Here Arjuna, he is called a tyagi, he is called a renunciate. And as we said, if you take these words, take these statements literally, that means that Lord Krishna does not seem to sanction the renunciation at all. Meaning renunciation of duties it does not seem to sanction. So as long as one has identification of the body, one cannot give up the action. And only when therefore one becomes totally free from identification of the body, then no actions can be given up. Then also actions are not given up. It's not that wise person has given up the actions, but actions have dropped off. In what way does he give up the action? By discovering that akartaham, that I am a non-doer. I am not karta or I am not the doer of the action. So we said vidvat sannyasa. That is renunciation by virtue of knowledge is, in the wake of the knowledge, this final notion that I am a doer, that also drops off. So this becomes a process of dropping off. The first stage is dropping off or letting go of these likes and dislikes. Second stage is letting go of this notion that I have to perform the duty. And the final stage is letting go of this notion that I am the doer. But that only can go in the wake of the knowledge. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, and therefore I am not this body. I am not the body-mind complex. As long as the identification is there, the body-mind complex, so long the sense of doership is there. As long as sense of doership is there, Lord Krishna says, one cannot renounce actions. And the actions get renounced when the sense of doership goes. So then also the wise man have not renounced action, but then because the sense of doership is gone, he doesn't perform the action from his own standpoint. And all this long description was given in the 4th chapter as to how while performing action also, he does not perform the action. Jnanam vidagdha karmanam tamahu panditam buddha tyaktva karmaphalasangam nityatrupto nirashrayah karmanyabhi pravuttopi naiva kinchit karoti saha. So nityatrupta, the person who is totally satisfied with himself, nirashrayah, one who has become totally free from dependence upon anything else for his satisfaction, karmani abhipravrittopi, even though he may be active in the action activities in every way, Neva kinchit karoti saha. In fact, he does not do anything. And this is what we said is renunciation of the sense of doership. And that is what Lord Krishna wants. That is what Lord Krishna prescribes and emphasizes, renunciation of the sense of doership. Because the Atma of the self is in fact actionless. And that I am a doer is a notion that arises on account of identification of the body. So taking the body and mind as myself, naturally the activities like the sense of doership is in the upadhi. Taking that to be myself, I come with the notion that I am the doer, and I am the doer is the notion that is born of ignorance. In the wake of knowledge, that notion also goes. And that is how, until then, karmani asheshataha tyaktum na shakyani. It is not possible to give up actions totally. And until then, karma phala tyagi. Here Arjuna, you become a tyagi or renunciate by renouncing the attachment to the result. Satyagi abhidhyate. He is called tyagi, he is called renunciate. Okay, we'll continue. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Vadarayanam Sutra Bhashya Krutau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyoma Vadvyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.